Welcome back to another round of Base Picks. Now, I didn't do one last week because there was only one card on and it wasn't really worth addressing, to be totally honest. However, there is quite a few different cards on this week, so I will be sticking to the main events and potentially the co-mains in a couple. There won't be a weekend wrap on Sunday just because I'm also going to be including the Naoya Inoue and Nonito Donaire fight in this, so I will be concluding the wrap to come out Wednesday next week. But there will be a couple other videos dropping over the next couple of days as well as this, so yeah, look out for those. But right now, let's get into it. Okay, so no better place to start than the Matchroom card that's taking place in Cardiff, Wales tomorrow, which will see Kenichi Ogawa take on Joe Cordina for the IBF Super Featherweight Championship. Now, this is a pretty good fight, and realistically, here's how I kind of see this fight breaking down. So Ogawa's definitely got the power advantage, and he brings sort of a relentless, aggressive style whereby he makes you work for all 3 minutes of a round. You can't box on the back foot and try and pot shot and sort of nick rounds that way. He's very much if you're gonna win this, you're gonna have to work, you're gonna have to be busy, and you're gonna have to have as good a gas tank as I do. He is susceptible to sort of slick, pure boxers who have enough pop to obviously, stun him, but also enough awareness to keep their backs off the ropes, to stay out of corners, to hit and move and be, sort of very fleet-footed. Also people that can sort of stand in the pocket, stay defensive, tag him and, evade the shots that he brings back, a la Tevin Farmer. Although he did win that fight controversially, most people who watched that fight thought that he lost and that Tevin Farmer actually did win it. But that's the kind of style you need to have to be able to beat him, outside of just having a straight one-hitter quitter right hand or left hand, obviously from a southpaw stance. Now, what Joe Cordina does pretty well, he's very textbook technical. He's got great movement, he's definitely got very good ring IQ, and he's also got a good combination game, but it's never sort of a overextended combination. He'll sort of throw one, two, threes, and then he'll make sure he's out of the way for when other shots come back. His biggest problem recently has been more so inactivity, but outside of the inactivity, it's also been the case of the hand injury that he sustained a couple years back. I mean, he hasn't looked his greatest in his last couple fights, and where they've been incremental steps up from what he was facing before, you have to suggest that maybe obviously as you go up the levels, like it gets harder, you all of a sudden don't look as impressive as you maybe did previously. Now, he's never had a world title opponent, or a world level opponent I should say, so whether or not this is like a step too far too quickly, yet to be seen. I definitely think he is of this level, but I don't think that this is his time just yet. The only caveat to that is if Ogawa does not make weight well, or you can see that he's been struggling, obviously being an older person making 130, but that hasn't looked the case in his previous fights, especially the fight against Fuzili, which was just about 5-6 months ago. So with that being said, I am actually going to predict Kenichi Ogawa to win this. I don't know the method, I haven't really thought. I don't think Cordina will get knocked out, but I do think that it will be a conclusive enough victory that even with potential hometown advantage and rapturous crowd applause and whatever, I don't think he'll get that rub of the green. It could possibly even be like a split decision, but I mean, I would also not rule out a stoppage very, very late in the fight. But I do think Ogawa does keep his belt on this occasion. And if I'm wrong, congrats to Joe. I mean, I do think he belongs at the level, and I feel like after this fight, this will be sort of the building blocks for him to, you know, become a gifted world champion moving forward, but I'm just not sure this is the one. So next up, I'm actually going to go to the PBC card, which is between Stephen Fulton and Daniel Roman. But Stephen Fulton is he's a very good operator. He does everything well. Like he doesn't necessarily have any specific flaw. Like I wouldn't call him a 10 out of 10 in any department, but he's like a solid 7 to 8.5 in pretty much everything. Defense, offense, angles, combination punching, punch selection, movement, ring IQ. I just feel like he takes the game seriously enough to whereby I don't question, you know, sort of his you know, his commitment to the art of boxing. And quite simply, I do predict him to win this fight, and I think it will be a unanimous decision. Daniel Roman's tough, so I do not see him getting stopped, even in like a salvo of pressure, unless there's a, you know, a freak referee moment where he just sort of jumps in unnecessarily, but I don't expect that to happen. So I'm expecting Stephen Fulton to win this one unanimously on points. So that's my prediction. Okay, now as far as I'm concerned, this is the big one. We're talking about George Kambosos Jr. against Devin the Dream Haney. Now, it's just been announced that Bill Haney, Devin's father, has been given an 11th hour approval to travel to Australia. So I believe he's actually on a plane as I'm speaking to you now. It's a big 18-hour flight, but Devin gets to have his dad in his corner, and I feel like that could make a huge amount of difference to him in this. I mean, I feel like he already knew what he had to do and was mentally prepared to do it, but having his dad there might just be that extra bit of reassurance that he needs. Now, the way this fight plays out, one thing about George is a very, very fit athlete, individual. Like, he will not stop trying, he will not stop trying to work, he will try and make it rough, he will try and make it dirty. He's not the hardest of punchers, but he does wing shots in, and he sort of does commit to his shots when he is throwing them. He does throw combinations every now and again, but he likes to stay closer to his opponent, mid-range to inside, to be able to sort of rough them up, to stay in the pocket, to try and let his work off that way. He doesn't really like to box a move. He's not sort of a outside jabber, you know, or like a boxer puncher. He's more of a pressuring, I wouldn't say he's a pressure fighter, but he's more of a pressuring boxer. That's probably the best way to sort of describe him. So he's going to be looking to not give Devin Haney any opportunities to, you know, to set up his shots, to get into his flow, to get into his rhythm, to, you know, jab from the outside, you know, to hit the backhands from the outside, to stay, you know, to stay mobile, stay loose, you know, stay not even back foot around the ring, but just staying on the periphery of George's kill box. And I feel like that's going to be his tactics. Now, apparently they say that he's supposed to be the taller guy of the two, but every time I've seen the two of them face off, Devin Haney looks the taller guy, and I know Devin's got the longer reach. So for Devin, this fight is best kept on the outside, not hit and move, but you've got to make it clear that this guy is not troubling you, he's not touching you, he's not landing to the body, he's not catching you with anything you shouldn't be getting caught with. Like, you have to make it look clean to the judges at all times that his shots are not landing, or if they are clearly hitting a glove, a forearm, you know, a bicep, an elbow. If you're protecting the body, like you have to make it conclusive at all points. Now, I know that Devin's going to look to take away some of George's best assets. One of his best assets is his overhand right. Devin needs to continuously be circling to his right, which is to George's left, because his left hook isn't that great. His jab's decent, but if you're circling around it, keeping your head obviously off the line at all times, you can probably avoid the jab. And he uses the jab more as a rangefinder rather than like a ramrod jab or a really thudding jab. So that's basically, I feel, the way that Devin needs to try and win this fight. Now, the big variable in this is the fact that, number one, yes, it's in Australia. Australia doesn't get a lot of big events, so the whole crowd is going to be, you know, ferociously for Ferocious Kambosos. Like, it's going to be vociferous in there. Like, it's going to be, and when you factor in that the Greek, you know, sort of the Greek element as well, like it is going to be a rapturous crowd who are not going to be giving Devin any quarter whatsoever. Now, I don't say that I'm expecting any kind of robbery, because obviously the judges aren't Australian. But that being said, like, when you're hearing the roar of that crowd for everything that you potentially think might have hit, and if you see a certain reaction that makes you think it was hit, even if it wasn't, that's still a scoring shot in your opinion, especially if it's, you know, in your blind side. So it's a tough one. Now, this is a very, very tough, because skills wise, Devin to me is is much better boxer, much better technician, much better skill set, a much higher ceiling than George. But George is also the fully grown man, got his full-blown man strength, and while he may not be a concussive puncher, he's definitely got enough in there to deter you. And obviously we've seen how Teofimo Lopez's face was looking after their fight. Like, clearly he's got enough to, you know, to cause some damage. And people obviously talk about Devin not having punch power, not being a puncher. Well, he's got a better knockout percentage than George does. So in that sense, I would have to assume that he would probably hurt George more than George would be able to hurt him. Not to mention, George has been off his feet before. Everyone talks about Devin being chinny or not being a puncher or whatever, not liking to get hit. Well, I mean, no one likes to get hit, but he's never been off his feet. And he's been hit by much harder people than George Kambosos has. I mean, than George Kambosos can hit. So I still think it's going to be okay. I think the fight definitely goes the distance. But if it doesn't, and if it wasn't to go the distance, I would not be surprised if it was George that ended up getting stopped. However, my prediction, look, I predict that this is a hard fight for both guys. Quite frankly, like, it's a really hard fight for both guys. I think George is a bit rattled, therefore he's been trying tactics, whatever tactics he can, to try and get into Devin's head. I don't think it's been working. I think the fact that Devin is so nonchalant about everything is winding George up, so he might come into this fight a bit more reckless and aggressive, trying to go for that knockout, which does play into Devin's hands. And Devin has to definitely look at this fight as, forget trying to please the crowd and go for the knockout and prove you're a knockout puncher and prove that you're just as exciting as everyone else. If you have to win this fight boring, you win this fight boring. You worry about being, you know, spectacular and entertaining in the next one. At the end of the day, you're not in America right now. Half the people, even the ones watching on ESPN, like, they don't really care for you because they've never seen you before. Let them think you're a boring fighter right now. If you're gonna go back to the zone in 2 or 3 fights time, you can be the entertainment guy over there. Right now it's about becoming undisputed. Like, so forget trying to win the crowd over. Just do what you have to do. Win ugly now, worry about looking good next time. But ultimately, I am giving my 100% support to Devin Haney in this fight. I'm backing him 100%, and yeah, Devin's 100% got my support for this one. Last but not least, we've got Naoya Inoue against Nonito Donaire. Now, this is a rematch from a fight that no one expected to be as good as it was back in, I think it was 2019, when they had their fight in the World Boxing Super Series. And Nonito pushed Naoya like probably harder than he ever expected to be pushed. Broke his orbital socket during the fight as well, which was a piece of adversity that Inoue had never faced before. So that ticked some boxes on his card in terms of that. Now, I recently saw an interview where Nonito Donaire said in that first fight he didn't fight to win. He was literally just fighting to kind of put on a show and be there, so to speak. Now, if you look at who's looked better out of the two since that fight, it has actually been Nonito Donaire. It's almost like he's had this mad resurgence, this Indian summer. Obviously, he's undefeated since that fight. Like, he knocked out Nordine Oubaali, who was undefeated prior to that, you know, coming back down sort of to the weight, like took his belt. Can't remember I think he had 2 fights after that, and I can't remember the names of the guys that he was fighting after those 2, but he's pretty much won all of his fights in dominant fashion. Who was it? Did he fight? I think he fought Raymat Gabayo as well. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, he fought Gabayo, stopped him. Who's the Casemiro? John Riel Casemiro, you know, was creating all kinds of problems to not make that unification fight. So I literally just feel like he's in the ascendancy and he's at sort of that last chance saloon, and he's coming into this fight looking for a much more conclusive end than the first one. Now, Nonito, on the other hand, I mean, he's still a great fighter. Like, he came through certain adversity which people didn't think he'd be able to. So he's shown that he's not just the bully. Like, he can take it. He can take just as much as he can dish out. That being said, he's got home field advantage yet again for this one. He already knows what to expect from Nonito Donaire, and Donaire is obviously 3 years older than he was last time. But is he training better? He might be training better now. He said that he's actually more in love with the sport now than he was previously. So all of these could point to what some people might call an upset. And you know what? We'll put it this way. I've put an accumulator on, and I've actually backed Nonito Donaire to win the fight in my accumulator. The odds were too good not to be totally honest. And I think this one definitely, I don't think this one goes the distance. And it's tough. This one's really tough, because everything tells me that Inoue is supposed to win this fight and win it more convincingly and conclusively than he did in the last one. But I don't see Nonito Donaire going back to Japan to fight this guy again to ultimately just lose. It doesn't make, it's the same with like Devin going to Australia, taking like a terrible deal, much worse than he's ever had before, and having everything against him to go and be undisputed if he didn't think he could really beat this guy, if he didn't think this guy was not on his level. So I've got to assume the same thing with Nonito Donaire. So for that reason and that reason alone, and I am quite happy to be wrong and vilified afterwards if that's the case, but I'm actually predicting Nonito Donaire to win this fight. I don't know if it's gonna be a stoppage or if he's gonna get a very close split decision, but again, I don't see it going the distance. And his power, he's got that unreal power, and he's actually applying it now. They're both monsters. They both hit unbelievably hard, but I think Nonito Donaire's got this one. So I'm picking Nonito Donaire, and I'm gonna pick via KO as well. Don't know what round, but that's what I'm saying. We'll see. I mean, we'll see if I'm right or I'm wrong. Anyway, everyone, leave your comments down below, and yeah, we will get back to this on Wednesday next week. So for now, it's Basis Picks locked.